Hey, welcome back to another episode of Web3 with Whitney. Today, I want to talk very briefly. I'm going to try to do this fast because I'm running a bit behind today, and I also want to try to keep my episodes on the shorter side. If you didn't know already, you can listen to the audio only version of this. You can come to the live videos and you can watch the recorded videos. I'm going to show you all that in a moment. But the main thing I want to talk about today is about the skepticism and criticism of Web3, which I want to do more to address because, as I've mentioned many episodes ago, when I talked about Web3 going mainstream and the difference between early adopters and innovators and everybody else, and how we're really in this time of it feeling very new. It's something that most of us are dipping our toes into for the first time. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's chaos, there's so much unknown. And that's just part of how the web goes when something's new. So that's okay. And along with that often comes criticism and skepticism. And I'm fascinated by it in general. I think it's really important to look at things from both sides. I tend to have a rose colored glasses approach to most things that I'm interested in. And I have to really step outside of that and look at the downsides. I'm going to share some of those with you. And I've already dabbled in that a bit in past episodes, but I've never been a fan of harassment. I mean, who is? Aside from the people that like to harass, like maybe they enjoy saying cruel things to other people, that kind of like power or control that comes along with it. I think most other people, or everybody aside from that group of people, are not fans of it. And it is especially hard for those who have gone through harassment. And this comes up today because I just finished listening to a Twitter space with Justine, who runs her brand iJustine. And for those that aren't familiar with her, she has been in spots like YouTube for many, many years. In fact, I just went back to her YouTube channel because I was trying to find the first video I remember seeing of hers, which I believe is one she did in March 2009. I really started on YouTube in, I think either in early 2009 or at the end of 2008. Not quite sure. I had already been dabbling in YouTube before that. I think maybe I created my first YouTube account in 2007. And for context, YouTube was created in 2005. And it's a good thing to bring up in the context of what I'm going to talk about today, because for me, YouTube has been great in some ways, but I've actually stepped away from a lot of content on YouTube until this series, because I was experiencing forms of harassment and it got to me. I'm not somebody who easily develops a thick skin. I didn't really want to. I like my sensitivity. And I also don't want to allow people to treat me that way. And unfortunately, YouTube has been one of those places where it's very common to receive harassment. And Justine, in this Twitter space that I was in tonight, was talking about her experiences with that. And I had already noticed this a bit about Justine, because before she did this Twitter space, I went to her Twitter profile and noticed how many people were saying cruel things to her. And I felt very confused. Like, why? What is the point? I'm going to share some of them in a moment just to give you some context. Before I do, just a quick update on my end. I'm really excited to share that I added an option for you where you can now officially subscribe to the audio only version of this show and listen on whatever platform of your choice. I kind of wonder if people have already figured out how to do that, because the amount of downloads and listens that the show has received thus far doesn't make sense. Like, I've been doing podcasting for years, and this show has grown really, really quickly, which I'm grateful and excited about. But I don't know how all these people are listening. So I wanted to make it a little easier for you. And I'm going to just show you how to do that real quick. If you go over to whitneylauritsen.com/web3, there's now a subscribe to the podcast button, which will bring you down to this section of the site. I don't know what happened. Something just disappeared. Oh no, it's just slow to load. So you can go here, and if you type in your first name and your email address and click subscribe, it'll bring you to your very own page through the platform that I use for the podcast called Hello Audio. So you can click this button and it will link it to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Podcast Addict, or you can just copy the RSS feed and put it into whatever player of your choice. But what I'm most excited about is this right here. You can unlock the Spotify link. So I had mentioned before that I added the show to Spotify, which is despite some of the issues that Spotify has had in the last few weeks in the podcast world, I absolutely love their podcast interface. So I added my show to Spotify, but if you go on here, you're going to notice this lock symbol and this paid button. Well, the way to get around that is now available to you when you click subscribe, because you'll get your own code. So I don't think you can use my code. I think there's only a one time. I'll have to ask them. But you'll get a code like this. This is mine. And you copy it and you can add it into Spotify, and you'll be able to listen. And each person has their own unique code. And yeah, that's just a cool way to listen to the show now if you prefer the podcast version of it. And also, if you sign up for that form, not only can you add the show to your podcast player, but that's another way for me to send you some well coin. Whenever I have your email address, I'm not going to spam you. That's not my style. Instead of spamming you, I'm going to airdrop you some well coin from Rally. And thank you to all of the people that have submitted questions. As I've mentioned, I'm getting a bit backlogged now with all these different requests for content, which is a great problem to have. And I will address each and every topic to the best of my ability soon. But for today, I want to focus on this harassment thing because I'm really fascinated by this. And I think it's really important to talk about whether you have experienced this before, or you're thinking about becoming a content creator. Or maybe you found yourself in a place where you have considered saying really critical things to other people. I think most of us have experienced that before. For me, that has mostly been in the form of like wanting to write a bad review on Amazon or Yelp or whatever platform because I was frustrated with a poor experience. That's pretty much the only time I will leave any sort of like critical response to somebody. But because I've been a content creator for going on 14 years now and have experienced a lot of criticism and harassment online, it gave me so much pause. I don't even hit the thumbs down button on YouTube because I don't like it when people do that to me. I wish that button didn't exist. It just doesn't seem to be important. It's like either give something a thumbs up or just leave it alone. Like, why do people have to do this? And I think platforms like YouTube have put too much power in that audience member to do things that are actually detrimental to content creators. And for me, that's caused me to want to do less on these platforms. I don't have comments on my YouTube channel because I don't want to read those negative things. But unfortunately, the downside of that is it takes away from the positivity, right? Just like right now, a huge piece of advice in Web3 is to turn off DMs, either DMs on Twitter and or Discord servers, because there's so much spam and scamming going on those platforms. And I was thinking today how that's really sad, because when you turn off your DMs, the people that actually want to have a genuine connection with you and do something positive in your life can't reach you. So I don't know if we can solve this problem, but I have seen some discussions about people trying to find alternatives to platforms like Discord because it's gotten so bad. And I'm always on the hunt for them. So if you come across them, let me know and I will do the same. So let's take an example or let's look at an example of two different experiences of this type of harassment. So here's this tweet from Justine, who was sharing the Twitter space that I just listened to. And by the way, you can go listen to this yourself. It's linked to in the description. This was hosted by Crypto Tech Women. It was really well done. It was an hour long. It's like listening to a really good hour-long podcast interview. And luckily it was recorded there. So I went on to here to actually comment and ask her a question because I wasn't able to ask this during the live stream. They didn't take questions. And after I posted my question and comment to Justine, I was reading through some of the others and it was a combination of people either trying to get Justine's attention on their projects, but also saying really kind of intense things, right? Like sarcastic things like more NFT shilling. Nice. First of all, she was not shilling her NFTs. She actually, to my recollection, did not promote any of her own projects. She mentioned her podcast. She mentioned her books. She talked about how she's minted NFTs and is thinking of working on them on her own and making educational content. But she wasn't on there to like promote something for people to buy. But people were assuming that she was doing that. And that's on the lighter side of this. This person said, I used to think you were cool. Then you started posting about crypto pyramid schemes. I've lost all respect for anyone who believes this is any more than a waste of time, money, and our planet. And I'm trying to look at this from a perspective of like, why would somebody post this to someone? There seems to be a lot of concern with someone like Justine selling out and making money, hustling. But why are some people so upset? And here's where it's an issue, is that it's not just about Justine receiving this. This is about all the people that see these comments from others and think, oh, well, I don't want to post that I'm in the Web3 world because I don't want people to unfollow me. I don't want people to think I'm shilling. Luckily, I have not experienced much harassment or criticism for the series that I'm doing, but it certainly crossed my mind. I'm sure I've lost some followers, especially because I've been doing the show almost every day. But I've also gained a ton of people in my life and positive momentum. That's why I keep going. But if people were writing these things to me, I don't know if I would have the strength to continue, right? Like I'm not at that level of Justine with this amount of following that she has. And actually, I feel grateful for that because I don't want to read these types of comments all the time. It seems so innocent, and yet people are writing things like yikes to her. Like, yikes, I can't believe you're talking about cryptocurrency, right? And all she's saying is come listen to learn about women and NFTs. And it had nothing to do with her own project. She was not making money. She did not get paid to speak. She actually disclosed that. Sai, I followed you since way back in the day, but I can't anymore because you're promoting this pyramid scheme. And I think it's important to take a step back and say, okay, why do so many people think this is a pyramid scheme? I don't. And I made an episode several weeks ago now. And if you go back to the archive on my website, you can see a whole episode I devoted to talking about whether or not NFTs are pyramid schemes. And you know what? Some of them probably are, to be honest. I'm sure there are people, like I mentioned, there are plenty of people scamming and spamming people. They're trying to take advantage of it. There's money grabs going on. But you'll find that everywhere. In fact, this was pointed out, I think, by Crypto Tech Women, the host of this a space that Justine was in tonight, who said this happens on Web 2 anyways. There's a reason why people are referring to NFTs as pyramid schemes, because pyramid schemes are already happening now, and they've been happening for a long time. I don't know the whole history of pyramid schemes, but I'm going to guess 20 years plus that they've been going on, right? So why is it that suddenly NFTs are being targeted that way? Why does somebody take the entire, just like it's like taking a few bad experiences and thinking everything is like that? And then my heart starts to go out to these people who may look through life without rose-colored glasses on them. It's like the opposite of me. I tend to be very trusting. I tend to see the good in people and assume the best. But perhaps people like this are assuming the worst. And that makes me sad. Like, why go through life assuming the worst of somebody? So what if today you tried to assume the best, even with someone like this? Like, I could get jaded by seeing these comments, but instead, what if I just assumed the best and thought, wow, maybe these people got scammed really badly, so they don't have any trust? What is going on in their life that has made them feel like they need to unfollow someone that they disagree with? And the closed-mindedness that this is what begins to happen, right? So if we can practice opening our minds more and learning from these things, I think that is good. And there are some points in here that might be valuable. One person said, describing being scammed as a rite of passage and a transition from Web 2 to Web 3, like there's an equivalence or it's incremental. The whole discussion feels like entering a cult. And I guess I could see that, right? Like when a group of people are all really excited about something and encouraging and hyping things, and sure, maybe it feels cult-like. I have to check myself daily. Like, I think I mentioned this towards the beginning of this series. Like, the excitement, the more that you see something, the more that you believe it, the more invested you get in it. Like, but I don't view Web3 that way. I think Web3 is just going to be the web. We're not even going to refer to it as Web3. It also, I don't know why I just thought of this, but it reminds me of when I first learned about COVID-19 back in like December 2019. It was referred to as a virus. It was referred to as coronavirus. And I remember it took me a while to even hear the term COVID and for people to talk about it casually. And some people thought, oh, it's going to be over soon. COVID's only going to last a few weeks or a month. We're going to get through it, and here we are years later, going on 3 years of this pandemic, and everybody has different viewpoints of it. Some people don't believe in it, whatever. There are all these different perspectives on it. But look at the evolution that it took from the people that didn't even know it was going on for a while. I mean, it took months and months for there to even be education around it. Then suddenly we're all involved in it. We're collectively in this world. And so no matter what your perspectives are on COVID, we're still all in it. We have a greater understanding. Now, please let me be clear, I'm not comparing Web3 to COVID. I'm just saying it reminds me of that period of when we don't know something and suddenly it becomes such a big part of our day-to-day life. We casually refer to it as COVID or the pandemic. It's more casual versus people that didn't even know what those terms meant. I'm sure they know what a pandemic was, but like you couldn't say the word COVID to most people back in 2019, myself included. I didn't know what that meant. So just like Web3, it's a learning experience. It's a transition. And I do believe that it is going to just become the norm for us. And maybe the people that are very skeptical and critical about it right now are scared. Maybe they don't like cryptocurrency. Maybe they don't understand it. That's the other thing too, right? People tend to be afraid of what they don't understand and what's unfamiliar to them. And maybe they're trying to protect themselves by saying these types of things. Like maybe if we speak out and say, I, Justine, we're going to unfollow you, maybe that'll cause her not to do things in Web3 and it'll have this ripple effect. Like, is it a form of control? And so this is an opportunity for all of us to step back and look at our reactions to these things, whether we're in it or against it or afraid of it. Like, where are you at in this moment? How are you reacting to other people? How are you resisting it versus embracing it? How are you noticing other people? And how are other people's reactions impacting you too? Because I have to constantly check myself. It also reminds me of a podcast episode I started listening to a few days ago. Glennon Doyle had Martha Beck on her podcast, and Martha Beck had this amazing line and statement that turned into a whole discussion around how so many of us tend to go with the consensus. We look to other people to affirm our choices before we become more outward with them, or before we decide where our next move is. And a lot of us are really afraid to do something new and unfamiliar if we don't see other people doing it. And this is also that curve that I talked about in the mainstream. Like the innovators generally don't seem to be afraid because they like to be first. They want to be first. Then the early adopters like myself wait to see what the innovators are doing. We don't need the whole crowd. We don't need the whole world to be doing something, but like we want to see someone do it first. Then once it feels safe or proven, we'll step in, and we like being on the early side too. And then the mainstream comes and more people gather because they're feeling safe and they're seeing the proof there, and they need that time. So I imagine all the skepticism is just like anything else that's new. And there's no promises in Web3. No one's saying that NFTs are the great, I guess. Let me correct myself. There are people saying that NFTs are the greatest thing in the world. But no one knows for sure what'll happen with NFTs. There's so much hype and confusion and chaos going on here. Nothing is for certain. But as Justine said today in her space, she bought Ethereum years ago and wishes she had bought more. But back then, it felt like it was just fake play money. And so she didn't buy a ton, didn't feel safe, didn't feel proven. So she just got a little of it just to play around with it. And now Ethereum does feel safer and more proven, and she wished she had more of it. So I think most of us can relate. There's tons of risks involved here, and each of us have to determine where our risks are. I would just, my big point today is to encourage you to try to not be insanely vocal about your fear and your criticisms and your skepticism to the extent of harassing others, because it just doesn't do any good. All it does is indicate to others that you're coming from a place of fear and negativity. What if instead you can come from a place of vulnerability and say, hey, I don't trust this yet? What if we asked more questions? What if people said, like, I'm trying to rephrase some of these things, like, is this a pyramid scheme versus assuming it's a pyramid scheme, right? And just asking the question, seeing where the response is. To me, that gets us a lot further. There's one other reference that I want to bring up before I wrap this up. I was going to make this super short, but here I am with 22 minutes. I haven't fully read this yet, but I imagine it's really good. This was written by Molly White, who's behind a really good, interesting, I should say, resource called Web3 is Going Great, I think is what it's called. I mentioned it a little while back. And it's kind of like a roundup of all the negative things happening in Web3. But I like that resource because I want to see what's going wrong. Not so that I can look at it skeptically, just so I can know what's not going well. Because I feel like when we know what the mistakes are and what the issues are, we can navigate them better. We can prevent ourselves from getting scammed or taken advantage of or being ignorant. So we should see all the different facets of something like Web3. So Molly White's a lovely resource for this. And she posted something recently about abuse and harassment on the blockchain. And it's not that long, but there was, I'll just read a little from the beginning and the end just to summarize it. She starts off by saying, in order to responsibly develop new technologies, it is critical to ask, how will this be used for evil? Technology companies employ red teamers, risk assessors, and ethicists, how do you say that? To do just that, or at least so they can say they are. Software engineers have formed initiatives like the Ethical Source Movement, recognizing the importance of deeply considering this question. How will this be used for evil? How will this technology be used to harass and abuse people is a form of that question that too often goes unasked, particularly given that the demographics of people who are most at risk for abuse and harassment tend to be underrepresented in the industry. Apple apparently didn't put much thought into how its AirTags locations tracking disk could be misused by stalkers and domestic abusers. Target didn't realize how its attempts to market to expectant mothers might out pregnant teenagers to their families. If you don't know that reference, click on this little footnote because that's a really interesting story. And lastly, Slack didn't foresee how many people might use its invitation feature to send people harassing messages they couldn't block. In the frenzy to attract venture capital funding and draw new users and investors into blockchain technology, this question is once again going unasked. While blockchain proponents speak out about the quote future of the web based around public ledgers, anonymity, it's another word I always stumble over. I'm not even gonna try. It's one. Do you stumble on words like this? Sorry, I'm just gonna skip over it. Um, those of us who have been harassed online look on in horror as obvious vectors for harassment and abuse are overlooked, if not outright touted as features. Ooh, I mean, this is a good read. I'm going to read this later on, but what an important point to bring up. Now, Molly, I believe, identifies as a woman. Justine certainly does, as far as I know, at least. Female presenting, I will say, to be considerate. Certainly, there are a lot of women who are, or women in general, are underrepresented in the tech industry. It's dominated by men. I talked about this a few episodes ago in my episode about women in the Web3 space and how it's really important to support them. This is why I listened to that space today by Crypto Tech Women, because they are there at the forefront of supporting other women in the Web3 space. So maybe this is part of the reason that someone like Justine is receiving harassment, because she's seen as a white young woman, and maybe some people are uncomfortable with her being in the space. Maybe they don't trust her because how she identifies and presents herself, even though if you look at Justine's background, I see her as a very trustworthy person because she's been around for 14, 15 years creating content, talking about the web and technology. I think she's the perfect person to step into this place, and it makes complete sense. I'm not surprised. But perhaps because of her gender and her age, her appearance in general, people feel like they can harass her, which is really disappointing. But unfortunately, it happens. So I don't fully know what Molly's point is and what she gets to in this article. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom and read the final paragraph, and let's see what we can gather from that. There is surprisingly little discussion of the enormous potential for abuse built into blockchain-based technology, and I've barely even scraped the surface here in this article. Indeed, I did search for blockchain harassment and found little more than promotional materials for some startup apparently solving workplace harassment with the blockchain. God help me, she said. Both the Web3 space and its group of outspoken critics have, to date, struck me as overwhelmingly male, which I suspect plays a role in this. Though often described as though it will somehow solve all the inequalities that are built into society, the leaders in the blockchain space don't appear to actually be thinking about a lot of them. Wow. Fascinating. Definitely some food for thought. So I guess this leaves me with a question for you, which is, where are you on this spectrum? How do you respond to criticism and harassment? Do you receive it yourself? Do you participate in it? And if so, how can you reframe it to look for good or protect yourself, set some boundaries, blocking, turning off your DMs? As much as I said there are downsides to that, it's important for you to set those boundaries and protect yourself. It's important for you to build your own confidence. I've mentioned many times, especially recently, how overwhelming spaces like Twitter and Discord can feel. There's a lot of people shouting. It feels very chaotic. Events and things like that in this space can feel really overwhelming, which is sad because I go to those spaces to find community and connection. And I feel like I have to deal with a lot of the noise and negativity in order to get to the gems. It's like the diamond in the rough, but it does exist there. And I hope to be a regular reminder to you that there is some positivity here. You're supported. I'm here regularly to hold a safe space where we can all learn together, no matter where we stand on these things, and ask these important questions. And also root for everybody, the equality in this space. Know that we have a long way to go. There's a lot of unknowns. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. That's okay. We're still at the very early stages of this. And I think along the way, as I said, I think it was the previous episode, if you're looking to find your own space in Web3, I think this is a great place to start. Look at all the people that aren't represented. How can you support them? How could you add more positivity here? How could you just be more supportive and add value? How can you ask these important questions? Maybe if you feel passionate about this, you can work towards creating more resources. As Molly said here, there just aren't that many. Maybe you can write about blockchain harassment and add to the conversation, add more resources. I'd love to see them, so please send them over to me. I want to reward you constantly for participating with whatever you do in the Web3 space. That's why I share these rally tokens. So even if you're just listening to the show, now you have a way to gather some of the rally tokens. Again, that's over at whitneylauritsen.com/web3. If you sign up here, you can add the show to your favorite podcast player, and I will surprise you at some point with some Wellcoin. You can also come to the site to ask any questions, to submit topic requests, and I will add them to my queue. I will send you some coin. I'm usually doing that about once a week on the weekend. And you can also just reach out to me, direct message me. Currently, my DMs are open, so I'm fairly easy to reach. You can email me. Email takes me a lot longer to respond to usually. But I would truly love to hear from you, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I would love to know what I can support you with and how we can build a safe place to have these discussions and to work on Web3 for good. And I promise I will address more things. I've been working on an environmental episode. It's just a big topic. There's a lot of big things here that feel overwhelming to me, but chipping away at them day by day. Thank you so much for being here. Wishing you all the very best. And go show iJustine some love if you want. Go follow Crypt Tech Women. They're doing amazing work in this space. So again, iJustine at iJustine and at Crypto Tech Women. It's linked in the description of this episode. And you can go listen to the Crypto Tech Women recording, because I thought it was really, really well done. It was February 15th today. And I don't know how long the recordings are up, but hopefully you'll be able to access them quite easily. And I'm at Whit Lauritsen on Twitter. I'd love to connect with you there too. And I'll be back with another episode soon. I'm going to go eat some dinner now because I'm running behind. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and wishing you all the best in between episodes. Bye.